Hello and welcome to another episode of That's Mental TV with me, Christine Charles. It's not just another episode, it is the last episode of season 2. And we have got some amazing guests for you today, talking all about work, going back to work, what it is looking like from a mental health perspective. We have got a career coach and a mindfulness expert to bring this to life and give you some tips and helpful advice that will help you. Welcome Karen Hall and welcome Amechi Udo.
Great to be here.
Thanks very much, Christine.
How are you both doing?
In good health.
Good health. And how are you, Karen? You're all the way from Ireland today.
Yeah, I'm delighted to be here. I think it's great to have the opportunity to talk about this and really timely. So thanks very much for the invitation.
You're very welcome. Now, I know you, Karen, because I actually enrolled in one of your programs several years ago, and it really helped me in terms of slowing my mind down. And Amechi, we've met through the coaching circles, and I know that the work that you've done, I mean, it's probably a decade since we've met, and you're very well respected, and I'm just delighted about what you're going to share today. So we're looking at the workplace. A lot of people are heading back to work at the moment, and tell me, guys, what is it looking like for people in the workplace right now who are slowly but surely going back to work?
Well, a gentle one to kick us off. I think it's broad. You know, you've got extremes. Some people, it's not even, we're now going back to the workplace. We've always been there. We've always been doing stuff. You know, if you think about, for example, your teachers, a lot of shop workers, healthcare service providers, a lot of people that maybe haven't even had the airtime, but we've taken, but they've been there all the time. They've been doing their cool stuff. They're now getting people who are starting to think about that return to work, and they've got to kind of decompress from being at home, and they've had a year potentially of another way of working, another cycle of working, and they're having to make that adjustment. For those of whom they're not going by their own transport, they've had to make again a mental adjustment. Okay, what's it going to be like going by bus or going by train, or even if it's simply walking? Still, oh right, well, I used to just walk. Now I've actually got to be a conscious walker. How close am I to somebody else? How far away? What have they got on their face? It's a big deal. And with the news content that we're getting, it's feeding in. And for those people who've had a bit of time to go, okay, I'm going back to work. I've spoken to work. They've given me guidance around the health and safety provisions. That's great. And I've got a practical understanding of what this is really going to be like, up to and including they've even shown me a video of what the office is going to look like now, because it may have been rearranged from how it was before. So I've got my own mental picture based on facts, not story, not anxiety, not clickbait headlines to sell stories, but actual information.
Yeah. There's a lot of unknowns, isn't there, guys? And I mean, Karen, what are you seeing in your mindfulness practice at the moment? And Amechi, you know, you're a career coach. You've been doing this for a long time. Both of you must have seen so many themes over the years. What are you seeing at the moment from a well-being perspective and a career perspective?
I think it's interesting. There are some people who have found that last year of various in and out of lockdown and different kind of being away from work or being out of work, stood down for the timing. Some people have really found that useful, helpful, healing pause. You know, they've realized how fast a pace they were working at, how overwhelmed and over busy they were at work. And suddenly they've had the luxury of being at home, of spending quality time with their family, of getting to kind of co-parent and be outdoors and I suppose schedule their time in the day in a way that really works for them and has improved, I suppose, their quality of life. But that's not true for everybody. Other people have had very negative experiences and they are delighted to be leaving the home and coming back to work. And I'd say for the people who have had a mindfulness practice, a meditation practice, or some other form of awareness practice, one of the things they've all consistently said is, I'm so glad that I've been able to kind of catch my thoughts when I'm really catastrophizing about something and just take a deep breath or go for a walk or take myself into nature and really be mindful and really use that as a kind of an indicator to start taking care of myself. So I think those people who already had an existing mindfulness practice, it's really sustained them through this period. And for those people who are returning to work, again, some of their worries and concerns, their fears, and the changes that they're having to deal with, they're also using their mindfulness practice to just slow it down, to take their time, to make, I suppose, the best choices for themselves that they can. What would you say, Amechi?
Yeah, I'd echo that, Karen. I mean, with the organisation that I work with, LHH, Lee Hecht Harrison, we've experienced lots of people who they're going through career transition. They've often found themselves between roles, and they've had to stop. And I think there's been a very clear appreciation of this whole pandemic experience. Instead of it just being, it's only going to be for a little while and then we'll go back to normal, they've started to recognize, this, as it's gone on for longer, my life. I can put energy and time into finding a new role or settling into a new role, because there's a fair number of people who've also found roles now. But equally, they've gone, to echo Karen's point, wow, I have been working really hard, maybe 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 plus years. For some, the challenge has been about reconciling that experience of not working. There's been practical considerations about who am I if I'm not this person who goes out to work. So there's been a lot of identity stuff that people have been exploring. I really echo Karen's description of people taking that mindful moment. I mean, we've just actually had a whole well-being week last week for people that included mindfulness activities. There are people who they literally are having their calls with us whilst they're walking. They're taking that moment outside to reconnect with themselves, to drop off their stuff as they walk, metaphorically, and to do it within as a dedicated personal time. This is my 45 minutes, my hour for me to get outside, reconnect with myself, re-engage, go through stuff that's been running through my head with a sounding board of someone outside, and then go, this is good, I feel better. And we're not there as therapists or psychologists. We're there to help them in terms of finding the next role. But we recognize that if you're not at your best, then it doesn't matter how much of the mechanics you've done, because you won't present at your best. You won't come across as your best self, and at your ease in its truest sense, to be comfortable in your own skin. And that's so important.
I've met a couple of people as well who've certainly initially the working from home and being on Zoom and really all of a sudden 100% screen time work kind of activity. And they found that that they've almost worked even more from home. And they've reported not having to things like that. So it's interesting how people have had to kind of find that balance, even at home, of I must have my breaks, I must go to the toilet, I must have some food, I must hydrate myself. Because for some people working at home, the pressure was never off, and suddenly their workplace was in their home place, and that kind of blurring of the boundaries became a little difficult. So for some people, that became an opportunity to really have to communicate what it is that they needed, you know, what they were capable of, what the limit was, where the boundaries were, and really ask for their managers or employers to facilitate that kind of more healthy work practice. And for some people, that kind of brought them up to a different level of assertiveness, which they found really empowering. And for others, if their employers weren't particularly sympathetic to that, and again, the motivation was kind of, I have to look after myself here. You know, I have to be well, I have to get outside, I have to eat, I have to hydrate. And if my employer isn't willing to facilitate that, then I'll find an employer who really values my mental wellness and my health, and that's part of their package for me as a valued employee is taking care of me. And I think we've seen a lot of that over the last year, of people really trying to build that into their system of, like you were saying, providing a mental health week or wellness activities, whatever they might be, giving people access to different, I suppose, ways that you can look after yourself. And as well, I know that a lot of employers are now offering training in mental health first aid, so that managers and leaders can identify somebody who's struggling. And I think that's a big shift in the work.
But not just struggling, Karen. It's not just about struggling. It's about maintaining and enhancing and building and strengthening. They're starting to be far more proactive. Not just, you know, my background includes the wonderful world of human resources, and I've worked with people, and you know, some of the toughest parts of my previous career in that sector were where I talked to people who had to take ill health retirement. They'd given many years of service, and in some ways the reasons why they had to retire were related to the work that they were doing. But it was very much, yeah, that's in the corner over there, occupational health. Whereas now, firms are saying, oh, if you need to get a mindfulness app, or if you want to invest in a fitness program to work out at home, or if you guys want to have a book club or a walking group, or these are normal things. And I think for the first time in our lives, we've got it in a nice positive way from all sides, as in our government's saying, by the way, we can still go out for exercise. We must make sure we. So you're hearing people going, oh yeah, but I must have taken my 60 minutes of activity. And they built that as a muscle. They built that as a habit. You're hearing, you know, it's never, like I say, I don't think we've ever had this drive from all directions to actually talk about our well-being so openly. This situation has cracked it open, and we're now actually calling out where folks are closing it down again. Excuse me, that's you're not the right ones for us. You're taking that away, or you're not doing what you said you do, or and more importantly, we can now generally see, as you said, Karen, we can see alternative options. And we're going to go for them.
You've hit the nail on the head, really, both of you, because this is all about boundary setting. You know, what are my personal boundaries now, and how do I communicate those boundaries to myself and those around me, and make sure they stay in place. And resilience is a massive part of that. It's something that I'm coaching a few people with at the moment. People are starting to see the light. There are still those who are in that transition phase, but it's all about boundary setting. And when it comes from the top, the government, that you must go out for a walk, you know, it starts to feed into the conscious, doesn't it? Not even the subconscious anymore, but the conscious. Actually, it's okay as a leader. If I'm getting up at 6 a.m., to look at my emails and I want to go for a walk at 10 a.m. and I've got no meetings, it's all right. And so I think we're starting to see a paradigm shift. Is that correct? Would you both agree with that?
I think that there's definitely a shift towards that. The experience of a lot of workers is that they're not necessarily getting that yet, and that they're either it's expensive to implement or it eats into work time. So I think it really does require employees to take responsibility for themselves and ask those questions and make those requests. And if they're not getting the opportunity to have a work-life balance, because, oh God, Tony Blair was talking about work-life balance when I was still nursing back in the 90s. So the fact that it's only now we're starting to see that change in direction to facilitating that for workers. And when you see in something like the National Health Service, something like 13% of medical staff intend to resign after the pandemic. They're burnt out. And I think, so for some people, maybe there isn't even the space to implement those well-being practices or those habits that we need because of the urgency of the pressing need.
Yeah.
So I think at the same time, while there is definitely a paradigm shift in attitude and an awareness, even if it's only because of the cost to the government is somewhere in the realms of 30 plus billion per annum. And the cost to employers is in the high 30 billion per annum of mental, not just mental illness or stress-related sickness absence, but just the cost of sickness in society, particularly amongst employees, is so expensive. It's cheaper to keep people well than to allow that to continue. And it's also a health and safety issue. So I think if employees are empowered with that knowledge, actually, if I am off sick for a day or a week, the cost to my employer is significant. And if that can be prevented, and that's the best, prevention is better than cure. If that can be prevented, then the saving to not just my employer and society, myself, my mental wellness, my family, exponentially, that ripples out as such a benefit to everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the self-awareness piece that we were talking about.
Yeah.
So guys, I mean, what tips, advice could you give with your backgrounds for those watching right now and are in that transition phase of whether they're trying to adjust working from home or going back to the office or hybrid, bit of both? What would you say to those people?
I think if you're going through that transition, first and foremost, acknowledge it is a transition. It's not necessarily going to be perfect. You're not going to get everything right first time. It's a learning process, and it will probably adjust and shift and change as you go through it. Continue to be flexible, continue to be adaptable, continue to be mindful of where it's causing undue concern or degrees of anxiety. But stay conscious. I think probably the key thing.
Yeah.
Self-awareness bit, isn't it?
Yeah.
Karen?
I think as well, like a great way to just check in, do your own litmus test. How am I feeling? And if I'm feeling a bit worried, or if I'm a bit angry, if there's some strong emotion present, taking that pause, and in mindfulness, we talk about that as being a little gap, where in that gap, you can just check in, and rather than react to something, we can respond to something. So if I'm feeling upset about something, rather than having a go at somebody or writing in a strongly worded resignation email, what's going on here? Am I worried about something? Am I tired? Have I got pain? Are my colleagues not observing the kind of social distancing things that I need? Is traveling into work a very stressful experience? Just kind of, okay, so that's what's behind this big feeling. Now that I understand that, I can take that little pause and choose, okay, what do I want to do here? What do I need to do here? Is there someone I can talk to? And once I've had that little kind of check-in with myself, how am I doing? Then I can speak to somebody, whether it's a colleague, a partner, a manager, somebody from occupational health and just say, look, I'm feeling this way, I'm a bit worried about this, or, and I mean, other people have had serious problems in the last 18 months. So in the age group of workers, you know, there's been serious increases in substance abuse, and people have kind of self-medicated as they've tried to manage their stress. So some people might need assistance with that. So being discerning about who you talk to, maybe you need to talk to your GP, maybe you need to have some counseling or coaching, maybe you need to just really sit down with your partner or your friend and just talk about how you're feeling.
Yeah.
You know, because a lot of people have been in quite intense isolation over the last while.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden there's people everywhere, and some people will be really excited and some people will be really stressed. So we're suddenly dealing with all of that, and that can be quite overwhelming. And even realizing that can give us that moment's pause, and then we can, oh yeah, that's what's happening. And for people who are empathetic, who really feel the energy of all the people around them, you know, sometimes what you're feeling is not what you're feeling, it's what all these other people are feeling, you know. So just realizing that, going out, standing in the stairwell, going to the toilet, doing a little 3-minute breathing space, that was my favorite practice. Then I could come in and I could communicate what it was that I needed to communicate more skillfully than just my head exploding and looking like I'd lost the run of myself completely. I could just say, oh, okay, we need to do this, or we need to slow down, or I'll be back in a minute, or need to take a break, or make an appointment.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, reschedule how I'm blending back into work. You know, this is too much. Can I maybe negotiate working from home 3 days a week and coming in 2 days a week? And can that be coming in later after peak commute time rather than 9 in the morning when everywhere is thronged with people, you know? So just that little gap to make that better decision.
Absolutely. Guys, we could talk about this all day long. We're going to pause. And thank you so much, Karen Amechi, for joining us today. If anybody wants to get in touch with either of you for career advice or mindfulness, you know, training or help, how can they get in touch with you, Amechi?
Well, it's some very simple ways. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. Just put my name in, Amechi Udo. I think I'm one of the only people with that name on LinkedIn. Otherwise, as I mentioned earlier on, the organisation I work with, LHH, if you go to www.lhh.com and contact us, and we'll be happy to help you.
Thank you. Karen?
For me, it's same as Amechi there, Amechi, I beg your pardon. You can find me on LinkedIn, Karen Hall. And the other way, if you haven't experienced mindfulness training, is you can contact the organization that I trained as a mindfulness teacher with, which is called Breathworks. And they offer all sorts of mindfulness training. There are bursaries available for people. There are mindfulness at work programs, mindfulness for well-being, for dealing with stress, or for living with chronic health conditions. So you'd be able to find a local mindfulness teacher near you if that would be helpful, and online training.
Fantastic. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for joining us on That's Mental TV. We will see you in season 3.